Welcome to today's edition of South Sound Business Report, where the topic today is the 2013 legislature and its connections to business. Stay tuned. Hello, I'm Jeff Rounce. Thanks for being with us today. It's 2013 and time for lawmakers from all 49 counties to assemble in the state capitol here in Olympia and work together to come up with a two-year budget that carries the state forward. They'll also be getting to know the newly elected governor, Jay Inslee. We'll be visiting today with four key leaders from the state Senate and the House of Representatives to ask them about the relationship between business and governance. From the upper house, Senator Keiser has represented South Seattle for a dozen years in the Senate, and she was a state representative before that. State Representative J.T. Wilcox ran unopposed for his second term from his Yelm District, number 2. He has been named a floor leader for the Republican Party, that's the minority side of the House of Representatives. Steve Kirby is in his 5th term, representing South Tacoma in the House after more than 15 years on the Tacoma City Council. He continues as chairman of the Business and Financial Services Committee. And we begin today's program with Representative Richard DeBolt from Chehalis, who speaks for fellow Republicans as the House Minority Leader. Here's our program co-host, Holly Smith-Peterson.
This is Richard DeBolt, the former director for the Twin Cities Chamber and also the current External Relations Director for TransAlta. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, thank you.
Let's talk about the state today. Okay. A new legislature, new governor, we're $1 billion in debt. How does that affect businesses?
Well, you know, I guess it depends on how you see it. If it's a revenue issue, we have to create more jobs to get people spending more, to bring in more revenue.
Right.
If you see it as a state that's short on taxes and you got to fill the budget by making it more expensive on businesses in Washington and the people every day, I think we're in trouble. But if you see it as an opportunity to put people back to work, to strip out regulations, to take this to make some bold choices, then I think we can have an opportunity here in Olympia.
I guess the question is how? How do you create jobs in this kind of economy?
Well, the government can't, and that's the main thing we have to remember is government can't create jobs. What it can do, though, is it can help get out of the way. It can do 90-day permits when they're supposed to, which it takes on average 2 years to get a permit in the state of Washington. It can work with businesses to help find trade partners. It can bolster the economy. It can give what we need to do is to train, educate, and enable our workforce to go out and get jobs, and that's what we need to do.
Well, education is a huge issue. That's the #1 job for the legislature, to find money for that.
Paramount duty.
Right, but how is that going to happen? Where do you see that going?
Well, it depends on if you go at it from the perspective of entitlements or if you go at it from the perspective of how are you going to get the funds. We have to do it. The court has said you must fund education. So like our caucus put out a bill 6 years ago that said we have to fund education first. So we believe simply as Republicans that you should fund an education budget, you should fund it separately, do it first, fund it fully in levies, equal education for all. And then what you do is you look at the rest afterwards and then you can fill in the entitlements later.
So education first, but then we've got the whole healthcare issue too, being one of 6 states to have to tackle that.
Yeah, you know, healthcare has been a big driver for us. It's absorbed a lot of our money. I mean, you look at it's a growing and growing percentage of our budget. We used to have great Chamber of Commerce Association plans that would help our small businesses. You know, they were made illegal by our state and driven up costs, and they've crushed the market in our state to the point to where it's gotten very expensive, and we've got to do something different.
So talking about new jobs and businesses, where do you see those coming?
You know, agriculture is still a big issue for us. Trade is still a big issue, but I would like to see jobs come in the manufacturing sector. I would like to see manufacturing coming back to Washington, not just exporting our raw products, but creating something value-added products. But we can't pick winners and losers. We have to raise the whole ship to get everybody working again in all the economies, not just King County, not just Pierce County, not just Lewis County, everybody.
Well, let's talk about the fact you said that although we're a bipartisan state, half of us don't have a voice.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because everybody sees this as a big Democrat state because we have one-party control, and we've had one-party control in the state for so many years. I mean, it's been 12 years. And that's one of the reasons we're in the position we're in, because when you have one-party control, the Democrats are in control, they're not listening to anybody else. What we need is a bipartisan voice. And if you look at the numbers in our state, 48% of the people in our state voted Republican. You also look at it from the perspective of the balance of the House. It's only 9,000 votes statewide that separate the balance of the House. So we're very close, neck and neck, actually. So, but we don't seem to want to hear both sides of the voice. You know, we see in the Senate right now, many senators, Senator Ranker just commented that he thought bipartisan was bad for Washington. You know, that's not the kind of attitude we need going into session. We have to work together.
Well, let's talk about business growth. Do you see both parties working together? Do you see one cohesive vision, or how would that work?
You know, I don't. That's distressing, I know, to some, but we don't want one vision of what economic development is. What's good for King County isn't good for Cowlitz County. We want to make sure that, you know, manufacturing, natural resource management is being progressed in other areas of the state, while aerospace and high tech is being progressed in another area of the state. We have different needs. One of the things we've done is this cookie cutter thing like growth management and these regulations. They've laid them all over the state, and they haven't thought about each individual area and how it impacts them.
Well, looking at the future, what do you want to tell business leaders? Where's their hope? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Well,
I think our hope is in our workforce. I think we have a lot of talented people that are ready to work. I think we need to have a cooperative government, and we'll do our best to get that cooperative government to help you to bring your businesses to Washington State. Don't export, build here, and you know, we need to bring prosperity back and not make it a negative word.
Richard DeBolt, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly. Business Examiner Associate Editor Breanne Coates is up next with another representative, Steve Kirby, a longtime elected official from Tacoma. This year, he again shares the House committee focused on business.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's jump off with our first question, which is, what are the top issues that are going to occur in the session that are going to impact business owners?
Well, again, that is a little bit difficult to answer at this point because not all the bills that we will be considering have even been introduced yet. But I think I'm comfortable in going out on a limb and telling you that this legislature is one that believes that economic opportunity grows in a climate that is friendly to both business and consumers. And so to that end, I believe there will be a lot of legislation that will attempt to provide economic opportunity for businesses and create family wage jobs. Let me tell you, a big question is, and I'll tell you what I think the answer will be, although it's impossible at this point. I don't think we're going to raise everybody's taxes. And I think, as usual, we will probably pass, I don't know, at least 100, probably not 300 bills that will provide regulatory relief for businesses across the state.
Okay, so when you say you don't believe we're going to raise everyone's taxes, that is obviously a concern for business owners. Can you address that concern? If you were talking to business owners and managers, what do you say to them when they say, we're scared that to make up for some of the budget gaps, you're going to go after businesses with either taxes or maybe increased fees?
Sure. Well, I would tell almost everybody to relax. It's not an unreasonable thing to be concerned about, obviously, because the fact of the matter is we don't have enough money to pay for all the stuff that we do right now, much less what the state Supreme Court says they think what we should be doing. So that's a legitimate concern. I would say that general tax increases are probably dead on arrival. But if you're a business owner who enjoys some sort of a tax preference, it might make sense to kind of be aware of your surroundings. You know, a tax preference by definition means you own a business, you pay taxes, I own a business, I pay taxes too, but I have some preference that's been given to me for some specific reason, and so I pay less taxes than you do. And you know, the idea being that will generate through the business that I conduct even increased revenues. So we have a committee that I think will spend a good deal of time looking over those tax preferences and seeing if they in fact do what they were intended to do. So if there are going to be any revenue enhancers, I think that's where you're likely to see them. But even that is not going to be really widespread in my view. I don't see much opportunity to raise revenue, but hey, things happen in the middle of a session, so I'm never surprised by anything that I see.
Okay. Besides taxes, what are some of the other concerns you've heard from business owners or business groups, and what are you doing to address those concerns?
I'll tell you that the number one thing I hear from business owners, and I see business owners literally every day, don't tax me unfairly, don't tax me unnecessarily, and very important, don't regulate me into oblivion. And I can tell you that the committee that I chair, the Business and Financial Institutions Committee, will probably consider anywhere from 50 to 75 bills this year, most of which will be brought to me by businesses who are seeking regulatory relief, something that is maybe outdated, something that needs to be taken into account for the newer technologies that exist, that sort of thing. And we will pass most of those, and they'll be signed by the governor. And like I said earlier, there'll be somewhere, in my estimation, and mine's only one committee out of 20, we'll pass a ton of bills that will do small regulatory relief things for businesses all across the state. And that kind of goes unnoticed often because each one is very small. But cumulatively, there is a great deal of regulatory relief that happens every year.
Describe to me the relationship you have with the business community, and maybe what would you like to see the relationship with the business community and the legislature look like now and in the future?
Generally speaking, I think this is a business-friendly legislature. And I think if you ask around, the business lobbyists, they'll tell you that in my committee in particular, everybody gets a fair shake. Everybody gets to say what they have to say. Everybody, both sides of the aisle, I take very good care of my friends across the aisle because I'm their friend across the aisle too, and things could change. And so it's really, I think it's a lot more cordial in the state of Washington than it is in the other Washington. We all get along. We're all friends. I think I told you earlier, politicians often sort of hang out together because nobody else can stand to be around us. And so we get along very well on a personal level.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Back to you, Jeff.
We have another state representative guest next with obvious business connections. J.T. Wilcox is the 2nd District Republican representative from the Yelm area. He grew up on a farm there and later worked in the family business, Wilcox Farms.
Let's start by talking about the very different economies. There's the Seattle economy and then there's the rest of the state. Can you tell us what you think about that? How does that affect businesses today?
Yeah, I think first of all, we are very fortunate to have this very strong economy that we have in Seattle. It is one of the things that's kept our budget afloat, and the truth is it helps lift the boats of everyone else. However, I think that there's always a danger of treating it as if we have only one economy in this state. And the truth is we've got this strong economy in Seattle, and we've got kind of a depressed economy almost everywhere else. Even in my 2nd district, which is kind of a Puget Sound county, it has more people on unemployment than any other district in the state. And we need to address those problems as well, and they're not exactly the same as the Seattle economy.
And one of the things you've talked about is taxes, how they affect businesses. What is that going to look like this year?
Well, I think there's going to be a big fight when it comes to taxes, tax increases, even in terms of the terminology that you use to describe them. And I think that the voters of the state of Washington have been pretty clear. They're not friendly to new taxes. And they've even been clear when it looks like someone else has to pay them. This is not a state that wants to soak people. And I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is the attempt that is being mounted, at least verbally at this point, to find businesses, industries, groups of people that are unpopular and stick them with additional taxes or getting rid of the tax incentives that actually sometimes are the only thing that are keeping the rural economy afloat. So we're not in favor of that.
Well, we've talked, there's no new taxes, but where did the increases come in for businesses? Or how do you raise revenue when, we've got an economy like this?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that we've got about $2 billion more this biennium in terms of the natural revenue that's coming in versus the previous biennium. So although we talk about starting with a shortfall, we've got $2 billion more to spend.
So where do you put that?
Yeah, that's the big question. Well, the court has already told us that we need to put about $1 billion into schools. Right. And our caucus believes strongly that it is the paramount duty to fund schools, and our approach is to fund them first with the first dollars.
Okay, and then you've got your second budget. Well, let's talk about incentives. That's a big issue for businesses too. Some have them, now they're not going to. What are your qualifications for incentives for business?
Okay, our goal is not to just hand a windfall to any particular group. You need to look at these incentives that have been implemented in the past, and if they are contributing to the economy and if they're contributing to employment, then those are good things and we should keep them. If they're just a handout, then we're not interested, and we've proven in the past that we're willing to apply a good economic test to tax incentives.
Well, business leaders have the question, where are we going to find funding? How are we going to grow in this economy? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the best way to grow revenue is to grow the economy itself. And as most Republicans agree, I think that government doesn't really create an economy, but it can help incentivize, and it can also get out of the way. And one of the things that's happened to the part of the state economy that's outside of Seattle has been that we've just seen manufacturers and even natural resource businesses disappear from places like the rural 2nd District, and people aren't able to work where they live anymore. And what happens? They're on the roads, having to drive to where the economy is good. We need to build the economy outside of Seattle as well.
Okay, then where can we build it? Okay,
well, again, using my 2nd District as an example, we had a thriving forestry industry for many years. And 65% of the acreage in the 2nd District is timber, but we are only working on about 60% of that acreage because the rest is locked up in either federal forests or in forests that are closed down based on regulations.
Okay, and let's talk about small businesses. You grew up on the farm. You saw small businesses and all kinds of industries fail or succeed. How does that strategy, how's that going to change this year, this term, as compared to when you were younger?
Well, I would say that it's important for us to strongly defend business this time because, we have a new governor who doesn't have a lot of private sector experience. We've got a lot of talk about picking winners and losers, and we don't think that's the way that you grow an economy. What you do is you get out of the way, you allow the innovators in the economy to do the best job that they can.
Well then, where this term, new governor, new legislature, where's the place for government and business or business and government? What's that relationship going to look like?
When I talk to businesses, what I hear the most frequently is they are tripping over the things that Washington has done to make it more costly to do business, and that usually has to do with the cost of employing people. And we believe so strongly that of the available labor dollars, those should be going to the pockets of the worker, not into the bureaucracy.
Well, J.T. Wilcox, those are great thoughts. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you.
We've moved across the Capitol campus to the Senate office building now to hear from our second Democrat voice. This is Senator Keiser. You came to Olympia in 1996 as a state representative. Her occupation at the time was a communications leader for the State Labor Council. A few years later, she moved up to the state Senate, actually a dozen years later. It's been a remarkable second or third career for you, hasn't it?
That's what life is like these days. You don't just stay in one job. As you know, I started out as a reporter and went into the communications field, which was sort of a natural progression. And then, it turns out that this world of legislating is also a bit of a natural progression from my perspective. I get to do the same thing I did as a reporter, which is ask a lot of rude questions and stick my nose into places that people don't necessarily want you to look.
Didn't invite you.
They didn't invite, but
right.
You have some level of authority to say, I want to know. And And then the sort of the sweet part of being in the legislative arena is then you can take action and do something about things that you find out about. And sometimes people aren't aware of all the things that do get done, but those can be very satisfying, especially on the local level.
I was talking about business in our program, Senator Keiser. What part does business have and does it play in governance at the state level?
Well, we work with business as a stakeholder, as a key stakeholder on virtually all legislation. And in fact, I'm going to be meeting with the Association of Washington Business in just an hour to get to know their new policy person on health care. As you know, as chair of the healthcare committee for the last several years, I've worked a lot on healthcare reform. Business is part of that whole transition as we move into a different way to make sure that all Americans have health security. And business has been anxious about it, but the path is clear now, and I think we can make that path smooth.
In just a moment, I'll circle back to the healthcare conversation, but the second question that I wanted to ask is, what is the appropriate role for the state government, or even more specifically, the legislature, in business? We talked about what is business's role in governance. What is the state's role in business as you see it?
Well, I don't know that the state has a direct role in business, although business does come to the legislature and ask for legislation in many cases. Many of the bills that are filed are at the request of certain industries. Some of them have to do with tax situations. Some of them have to do with more proprietary things, banking and so forth. Some of them, though, are about things such as labor laws, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance. Those kinds of social insurance programs are of concern to business. The other element is just that as a healthy, vibrant community, we need jobs. And jobs are key to our economy, obviously, and the private sector economy in particular. So we need to work with the business community to make sure that we have a absolutely first-rate public education system, so people are, when they leave their educations, whether it's high school or community college or vocational college or four-year degree, they are ready for the workplace and can adapt to the changing workplace successfully. And that's, I think, all of those things are real partnerships.
Let's talk about a specific case, and you raised it earlier, the health insurance reform that's taking place. Washington is one of the, I think it's 6 states that actually has set up its own health benefit exchange, part of Obamacare. Sometimes business people have not been fans of setting up a new government bureaucracy to help them. How would you describe this being different?
This isn't a government bureaucracy, first of all. The health exchange or the health plan finder is a public-private partnership. So it isn't government employees, it isn't another bureaucracy. I think that makes it a little more nimble, a little more flexible, and a little more like the private sector likes to see things work. What we also are creating is essentially a marketplace, not a bureaucracy. A web portal where anyone can go and compare apples to apples the different health offerings so that they have clear understanding of what they're paying for and what is covered. Currently, with the confusion in the marketplace, people are at a loss. They don't know what they're buying, whether it's a business purchasing a health plan for employees or an individual purchasing a plan for themselves.
Who's paying for setting up this exchange?
The exchange is being funded totally by a grant from the federal government.
Okay.
And so we have been very fortunate in our state to go after as many of those federal dollars early on that were available. Some of them, very importantly, were for our educational institutions, our University of Washington Medical School and Nursing School, to train professionals, because as we expand coverage for healthcare, we need more professionals, and that means more jobs, by the way. We received over $100 million in training grants for healthcare professionals from the federal government. The expansion of Medicaid, which is expected to happen January 2014, is expected to create something like 70,000 new healthcare jobs in our state alone. So it's a huge economic driver as well. overall, in the last 2-3 years, we have been able to get something in the neighborhood of about $400 million in federal grants to get health care reform and the transition to the new health care programs in place. And by getting that kind of federal funding, it's a kind of economic stimulus for our entire economy.
Sure, sure.
That's right. And
It's a big subject, Senator Keiser, and one we'll be back to talk more about later in the year. That's the amount of time we have. Thank you very much, Senator Karen Keiser.
thank you.
And that wraps up today's program on the 2013 State Legislature and business. We have links to our guests on our Business Examiner website, www.businessexaminer.com/SSBR. We thank you for joining us today on the program, and we thank Mobility Media Design and its principal, Richard Aronson, for production of this program. We'll be back next week with another episode of South Sound Business Report, and we invite you to join us. Tune in, same time, same channel.